Hey, so I've got a free live webinar coming up next week on Wednesday, which is really all about how we can reframe our fear into power. And this is a really important topic for a lot of reasons, and it's quite prescient at the moment. I was talking earlier on to somebody else about how um, it's very understandable that so many of us are feeling fearful. We're feeling the effects of fear. We are having to navigate risk in a way which we hadn't really had to contemplate before. Um, from a perspective of our own safety as women, um, from a perspective of the risks to having an opinion, which seem more and more um, of a kind of growing issue as time goes on. And we see it everywhere. I mean, I think everybody kind of refers to the United States as being um, the place which is really at the kind of apex of dealing with authoritarianism. But at the same time, in the UK, there was a huge rally in London over the weekend, which was a far right demonstration. So that's here in the UK. We know that that's also prevalent across Europe. And just over a year ago in the UK, there was a wave of racist riots. And, we are seeing a continuation of that where individuals are harassing people that they believe to be immigrants, even though they know nothing about them, and going to hotels because they believe that people are there who are seeking asylum. Um, it's it's the kind of dehumanization that we that you hear about in terms of psychology and in terms of how things unfolded in the Second World War, which people keep coming back to. It feels dark and it feels frightening because we don't know where risk is even coming from at the moment. And it really kind of raises the issue about intersectionality and how you have to appreciate how everybody's experience is different because you have to look at it through the lens of intersectionality and the way that society even views you and trying to understand that risk. So it's important to put it in context. It's important to recognize that it's not irrational to be fearful at the moment. It is not something that you're imagining either. That's the other thing people quite often say to me is, I don't know if I'm imagining it, but this just feels quite threatening, or this feels really scary, and it's it's important to remember some of the kind of rules and techniques that that are going to be helpful to you, which is not about trying to either sort of puff yourself up with fake confidence or to convince yourself that everything is okay. I don't subscribe to the idea of just being able to really sort of manifest a new way of being just by wanting there to be. And I don't have anything against people who are aligned with that. If that's what they believe and they find that helpful, that's absolutely fine. I'm never going to criticize anyone for what works for them. But for me, what I find more helpful is really being able to look at things in a more sort of evidence based way, because that's my background, that's what I'm comfortable with. So I'll go into more detail at the live webinar that I'm going to do, but there are just a few points that I want to share to really help you think about how you can move from, it's like having a default position, move from your default position being fear to power. And I'm not saying that as somebody who is working from a sort of viewpoint of feeling like I'm in my power mode all the time. Absolutely not. But I think there is something to be said about not having that as your default. And that's something I'm definitely familiar with. but feel that I've been able to transition from feeling like that is my kind of normal default position to feeling more of a sense of power, more of a sense of impact in how I live. And so for me, this breaks down into four main areas. You know, the first thing I want to talk about is the power of your ability to make your own decisions. You have the power of your own choice. And there's something really important in being able to recognize in the moment how you're feeling and how you can respond to that. So, I've talked before about the importance of really kind of checking in with ourselves and getting that clarity on what our body is trying to tell us, because that's a really important level of wisdom that people often override. And actually, it's really powerful. Understanding what our body is trying to tell us, checking in with our emotions, and thinking about what we need. Because if we can do that, then we will be able to make decisions that serve us. And we can then move into the second point, which is to build trust in our ability to make decisions. So we don't have to second guess ourselves because we know that we are going to do the things that are in our best interests. Almost as if we would, if we were parenting or caring for a friend or looking out for somebody else. If we can trust ourselves in the same way, we build a foundation that makes it a lot more of a default position. It makes it less of a kind of, it just then doesn't become a debate. It just becomes a sense of knowing, a sense of groundedness. So then the other aspect to it is really being able to think about how you got here. That very often fear is based in uncertainty. Okay, so uncertainty is really the crux of what is causing the fear. And nobody can predict the future, but what we can do is recognize that we are at a point in our journey and that we haven't just sort of fallen out of the sky and landed here. We are here because of a combination of decisions that we have made, but also because of how we've been able to deal with our environment. And it's never one thing or the other. So it's remembering what you've achieved so far, but also what you've survived. And that can be a helpful way of being able to reframe uncertainty about the future. Because if you can work out what it is that's causing you fear, then you can really kind of dig into, well, if I'm fearful about this, if I can kind of hone in on that and be clear about this is what I'm fearful of, then, for example, taking a step up or taking a chance or a risk in your career, maybe sort of stepping outside your comfort zone in that way. But if you can say, well, I've had to do that before when I moved from my old job to my current job, or that experience that I had, I was able to use that and get through it. I have been through something like this before. Then that puts it into greater context and it takes away that sense of complete uncertainty, but being able to have some kind of awareness or knowledge that you do have the power to adapt and respond. That if the worst things happen, it doesn't mean that the world will fall apart. It's recognizing it for what it is and who you are and how you got here. And then the fourth thing, which is really relevant to this, is an extension of what I was just talking about, which is really being able to reality check. So it's going a bit deeper than what I just talked about before, but it can also be helpful in a reality check to be able to sound out somebody else. It can be helpful to get an outside perspective and to be able to say, I'm a bit worried about this, I'm concerned about this. I don't know how this is going to go. And very often it's the people that are close to you or who you've shared with who can say, you know, they'll have a bit more of an objective perspective on it. They will have that view on, similarly to what I was just saying, well, you've been able to do this in the past and you've been able to do it, it's likely you'll be able to do it again. But also, they can take their own perspective of what your fears are because they're not so close to them. So, what might feel very close and very worrying to you, to them, they'll be able to look at in a more pragmatic way. And so, being able to step outside yourself, it's really about taking the I out of it, it's taking the ego out of it. That really helps to reframe fear, because rather than it always being about me, what if I get this wrong? What if I fail? What if I can't get this right or succeed? It's it's not so specific. It's more about responding to what will happen and having more clarity around that. So this really kind of links back to a lot of the work that I've talked about before around the my North Star framework, which is really about how you kind of move from a place of feeling stuck and wanting to get clarity to creating a vision and then following it through. This is taking some of those tools and resources and applying them to how we can live day to day with the ongoing presence of fear in our lives. And it's an area that's going to need more attention because things are so difficult and because we are having to really build our resilience and work out how we can keep making progress, how we can move forward for ourselves. So I hope that's helpful. I would love to hear your comments about that topic in particular. And yeah, if there's anything else that you would like me to focus on in regards to the live webinar that's coming up, all about switching your default from fear to power, I would love to hear from you. Okay, so please subscribe, like, share, and follow for more content.